Okay, we are live. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to our July meetup, and thank you so much for joining us this evening, Sydney time, obviously. It's always great to have you all here with us for another meetup, All Things Azure. To all our friends in Sydney and Melbourne, these are tough times for now, and hope you are all doing very well, holding up in this new outbreak and lockdown. Stay home and be safe. My name is Samuel Levy. I'm a principal consultant at Lab3, one of the Microsoft consulting in Australia. And today it's our agenda for today. So we will talk about the upcoming events. Then we go on the Azure news from the developer side since the last time we met, and then we have our main speakers for the main session, guest speakers for the main session, Benny Austin from Microsoft Australia, one of the CSA at Microsoft Australia, talking about all the Azure Purview. All right, so our contacts are on the screen. So if you would like to get in touch for the speaking or anything, please do. And today we've got, as I said myself, talking about the Azure news, starting with the upcoming events. So Microsoft Reactor Series, as usual, so they have a space in the Meetup, so they announce and organize a bunch of sessions. So obviously now going all online from different community members, from MVPs, from Microsoft staff, from anyone in the community who's willing to present at different topics. It can be technical, it can be non-technical session. Please go check out, and if you found any session, please do attend. Microsoft Cloud Skills is the new central place from the Microsoft dedicated for the online learning, and you can access all the learning around across all the Microsoft technologies. It can be Cloud Skills, Power App, Office, Modern Workplace, everything you can find there, and you can use that as a central place for all the learning path. If you are preparing for the certifications or everything, you can use that space for those resources. And there is another developer-specific bootcamp coming up in September. So the announcement will be out in August, called Online Developer Bootcamp, and we will share more details on that one in our upcoming meetups next month. So during the session, if you have any questions, make sure you pop them in during the chat box, and our friends make sure that we can pick up, answer them, or if it's during the main session, we make sure to pass them through to the guest speaker to get some answers to them. And as I said, so let's get into the announcement for this month. Public preview, starting with public preview. There is nothing in the private preview this month. Public preview is starting with the Azure Purview, which is a topic for our main session today as well. In the recent update, the service itself is still in preview, but they extend the service to support more data sources. As you can see, like Erwin, Google BigQuery, or Looker are now supported as the new data sources. These data sources support full scan for extracting the metadata, and then it can be they can be used for fetch lineage between the data assets, which we leave that to Benny to get more in details on that one. Azure Service Bus supports for larger message up to 100 megabytes is added in the preview now. this feature is only available in the premium tier of the Azure Service Bus, and now supports sending and receiving messages, payloads of up to 100 megabytes. Before this update, for larger messages than megabyte, you had to basically it was your responsibility to chunk it into smaller messages. But now it's a big update as an enabler for legacy workload integration and open up the avenue for migrating the legacy workloads to use the Azure Service Bus with larger messages payload supports on the other like enterprise messaging brokers. For example, the traditional large XML payload is in if you have some sort of integration with those messaging brokers. Now you can bring it up and migrate it to Azure Service Bus and take advantage of this new updated feature for 100 megabytes large messages. API management and event grid integration, it's a new update in preview. So with this integration, basically this update enables the integration between API management and event grid. So now you can, and that means you can use this feature to publish API M resource or instance related events to event grid. Which then can be used to send to other Azure services for management and trigger downstream process. For example, use logic apps or Azure functions or even generic webhooks if you would like in other platforms to handle those events. And by resource related events, we mean the events related to the Azure APIM instance. For example, when you add a new API, or when you add a new user, or when you add a new product, or you change a subscription key, or those kind of events which is operational from the operations inside the API management. So now you can handle those events through Event Grid. Azure Spring Cloud got few updates. If you're familiar with Azure Spring Cloud, that's a fully managed service for Java applications on Microsoft Azure platform. So with this July update in Azure Spring Cloud, a new integration with New Relic 1 is added, which enables you to fully monitor your Spring Boot applications easily with this New Relic 1 and enables you for faster troubleshooting of those applications. Another update for this Azure Spring Cloud is they downgraded the minimum app instance size and reduced it to half a virtual CPU and 512 meg RAM from previously, which was one virtual CPU and 1 gig RAM, and that's a great update for better resource utilization as well. Application deployment also supported by automation of application deployment is also added to the Azure Spring Cloud to support by the Azure Pipeline, Azure DevOps Pipeline, and Terraform. Application Insights got a new update and a new feature added as part of the availability test, and it's called the standard test. If you are familiar with the classic test, which is called URL ping test, and this feature is for monitoring your application endpoint, your application public endpoint, and its availability. With this new feature as a standard test, basically it's similar to the URL ping and test, but it supports single request test, and it includes SSL certification, validity, and proactive lifetime check. What that means is you can set a period before certificate expire on your public endpoint, and then you can be alerted if certificates expiry get into that period and it needs to be updated. So that's a great feature for another level of monitoring and availability of your public endpoint by Application Insights. Other updates in the public preview. So web application firewall got the latest OWASP mod security core rules version 3.2. With this preview, it's still in preview, but with this update supporting this OWASP mod security core rule set 3.2 is offered for WAF deployment that are run on application gateways only. So it's not yet available on the front door. So it's only available on the WAF deployment for application gateways. And this release basically for mod security 3.2, OWASP 3.2 includes better protection for the web apps, reduce some false positives from the previous versions, and better performance in terms of the implementation. Plus, Microsoft also added a few updates on top of this, with the file upload limit to 4 gigabytes and request body to 2 megabytes, which is another update added on top of the OWASP 3.2. Form Recognizer got the container support. So Form Recognizer is one of the services as part of the cognitive services in Azure. And now a new containerized version of the Form Recognizer is available to use now, which by this, it can be used, this service can be used for deployment of the Form Recognizer on Edge or any other environment which is not on Microsoft Azure. Azure Kubernetes Service got few updates as well. The first one, now you can create a cluster without local user account. And by default now, before this update, when you create the AKS cluster or any Kubernetes cluster, including AKS, a local admin account will be created for you by default. And by this update on AKS, and if you enable the Azure Active Directory integration with the AKS, you no longer need for the local admin account, and even if to use it. And by this feature, it enables you to disable the access to local admin account, and when you setting up the AKS integrated with the Azure Active Directory, so it removes that availability of the local admin account, and that's a great feature for increasing the security posture on your AKS cluster. Another enhancement added to the AKS called a Smart Default, and basically a Smart Default is the new feature in AKS that enables a set of scenario-specific cluster configurations that you can apply in one click, basically. By those scenarios, there are some predefined scenario as of now for that, which is for example, dev test, cost optimized scenarios, or if you want the cluster for batch processing only, or if you just want to basically harden your access to the cluster. So there are now some preset configurations in terms of the overall cluster configurations. For example, for the node size, auto scaling, availability zone supports, Azure monitors and metrics, and even enabling a specific set of Azure policy in your cluster, which is designed for these specific scenarios, as we mentioned about, for example, dev test, cost optimized, batch processing, and hardening the access to the cluster. You have the still option to customize it further if it's required, but you get the preset as a default, which you can apply in just one click now in the Azure portal. Another update for the AKS is the event grid integration. It's very similar to the same update which we talked about, that one for the API management. Similarly on the AKS, so we get that integration with the event grid for the cluster events, and we can use that feature for the cluster events automation as well. So as of now, they only support 2 events. So one is you can handle the event for new Kubernetes version upgrade availability. So if any new upgrade availability, and if a new version for your cluster is available, you can use that one. You can get this event and can handle, and as part of the automation, whatever you want to upgrade your cluster. And the other one is for the node image upgrade availability. So these two events are now covered as part of this integration with the event grid. If there is any question related to the public preview announcement, please post it in the chat, and we can get back to this when we finish the announcement. So let's move on to the GA announcement. And the .NET Cosmos DB basically now can act as a session state and cache provider in your .NET applications. So that feature is GA and it's available now. And by this, it's interesting update. And by this, it means you can now use the Azure Cosmos DB as a session state provider and distributed cache in your web application, similar to like a Redis cache or any other services which is already available. And how it enabled is .NET SDK for Cosmos DB has a specific implementation for the iDistributed cache interface from the .NET ASP.NET Core application, which you can use that implementation and leverage that one to enable this feature in your .NET application or ASP.NET Core applications. Azure Map Android SDK is GA now, and basically it's updating the Azure Map Android SDK to be aligned with the core features of the service and make sure it's you get a consistent developer experience with other SDKs available, for example, for the .NET or other language as well. Azure Spring Cloud pricing model change is in GA now, and by that is a fresh pricing model for Azure Spring is announced, and from 1st of August this year. So this pricing model is effective, and by that you can get the base price and capacity for the existing basic plan with 60% reduction and for the standard plan with 50% reduction. So that's a huge cost saving when it comes to the Azure Spring Cloud from 1st of August. Azure Service, App Service and Function Apps, the new secret configuration support for both of the Linux and Windows hosts are GA now. And basically that feature means to simplify the secret management with the Key Vault integration and using the managed identity. So now you can, that means with the app service and function apps, both in the Linux and Windows, now you can use the Key Vault references, which underneath it can use the managed identity to access the Key Vault. And as an end-to-end, it totally simplifies and provide a more secure secret configuration for your applications. Azure App Service Environment version 3 is also GA, and it's gone GA in 1 or 2 weeks ago. And basically, this version 3, as part of the isolated V2 pricing tier of the app service, is available now. And the whole thing is it simplifies the deployment experience. It simplifies the networking configuration comparing to the V2 for you. And it supports availability zones also, which is a great feature, and better isolation when it goes down to the hardware level. And also it supports some cost saving and cost reduction by removing the stamp fee from this new V3. Comparing to the V2. Application Insights also got 2 updates in GA. And the first one is the integration with the Java and Node.js apps is the GA, and that means if you're familiar with the Application Insight is the native APM solution available as part of the Microsoft Azure platform, family of the app services. And with this, similar to .NET applications, so now you can enable the integration with the Application Insight without any code changes, without any specific configuration required. Similar to the way we do and we used to do with the .NET applications. So now you can exactly do the same thing with the Java applications and Node.js applications that run on app services. Another great feature is also Azure AD integration is enabled and is added to the Application Insights. So that means by this feature and enabling this, so you can, that means you can ensure that only authenticated telemetries go into your Application Insights resources, and not all the telemetry or any non-authenticated telemetry can go into your Application Insight. It's a key step in terms of enhancing the security and reliability of your telemetries. If you are using for making some big decisions, it can be operational decisions, for example, for auto scaling or anything, or troubleshooting, or even if you use them for the business decision, for example, usage of the application or anything else. So you can make sure all those telemetries are coming from the authenticated sources. So these are the announcement for the public preview and GA. And similar to previous months, useful links and announcement, a new breakpoint is a webcast show in Australia time every Thursday morning at 11 a.m. So there is a new episode coming out. That's a good effort from Microsoft Australia, Simons and the team. So in every episode, there are short episodes in terms of timing, and you can learn new stuff from community and from different people working on interesting stuff. Similarly, there is another community newsletter, which is a curated content from developer effort around the world, Australia and other places, and you can receive that one monthly in your mailbox. So that's a great content also delivered and by Simon and team as part of Microsoft Australia effort around that one. So that's pretty much for the first part this evening. So if there is any question, let me get back to that question. Otherwise, we can move to the, I don't see any question as of now, but so we've got the great speakers from Microsoft Australia, Benny Austins, for today's main session. And yep, so let's take a short break, and after that, we hand it over to Benny for the main session completely around the Azure Purview. Thanks, everyone. Okay, Benny, over to you.
Cool. Thanks, Sam. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this session on Azure Purview. My name is Benny Austin. I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft. I focus specifically on the data and AI platform services offered by Azure. I work primarily with the partners to enable them to achieve the goals for their customers, and I'm based in Sydney. And today, my presentation is about Azure. It's more of a demo than a presentation, so I'll be switching in between my PowerPoint presentation and the demos. So I've got a lot of content to cover, so we'll get that underway. So I'll just bring up my demos. All right. So what is Purview and how does it fit into your data architecture? So just give me a sec. So I worked in consulting for a long time, and like every time like you build a data platform for a client, the question that commonly comes up is, okay, now that we have built up a data platform and we have onboarded our data sources and we are doing great reporting and we're building great AI models out of this, how do we know like what is available in the data platform? Like how can I trust the data in the data platform? Like how do I know what path the data takes before it ends up in an AI model or before it ends up in a report? And is there any sensitive data that is held in the data? And is there an easy way to find out where this sensitive data is available? And if I need to act on these sensitive data, either in terms of archival or redacting it, how do I go about it? And this is something that we come across quite often. And this is where Azure Purview fits in. So Azure Purview is a PaaS service for data governance. And it in the preview state. So we've been working mainly on the fundamental pillars of data governance, which is basically identifying your data resources, building a knowledge map of your data sources. Your data sources could be either on Azure, or it could be on-premise, or it could be on another cloud like AWS or GCP. So we kind of want to get a full picture of your entire data landscape. And once that knowledge map about your data assets are built, the next step is kind of classifying, having some kind of semantic classification of the data to say, okay, so what is the content of the data that is available, and then the ability to tag the data with sensitivity labels that are currently available in Microsoft 365 to that integrating into the data, and also to know what is the lineage of the data from the time it enters your data platform till it either exits out of your data platform as a downstream distribution to another application, or if it ends up in a dashboard or in a AI model, how does the data track from source to destination? So that those are the key things that in the preview we are kind of focusing on. So in terms of the architecture, Azure Purview consists of a data map, which is just a metadata of all your data or all your data sources, which could be on Azure, which could be on a multi-cloud, or which could be on your on-prem. Using that data map, we do build a data catalog, which is internally a graph database. And using the graph database, it can be queried using the interfaces that is provided out of the box, or it can be queried using the Insights module, which is a bunch of reports on top of it. Now, before I talk about the catalog, it's kind of important to understand, like Azure at the moment also has like a data catalog service. which is in Gen 2 or V2 at the moment. So, which kind of does a similar feature, but like with Azure Purview, the underlying platform that we has been significantly shifted. So Azure Purview is built on Apache Atlas APIs. So it is a kind of a managed service on Apache Atlas APIs, and that's a significant shift. And if you are building a data governance capability, our recommendation is to start with Azure Purview. And if you do have some of your capability already built in Data Catalog, previously there are migration paths into Azure Purview. And the same holds with some of the master data management solutions like MDS, which probably is available at the moment in SQL MI, but going forward, pretty much all the master data management will be integrated into Purview as well. And the reason for going with Atlas APIs is, one, it is like it's open source, like, and it also helps your developers to customize or add features that are not available out of the box using the REST APIs. Or if you're an ISV, you could produce, you could offer a product offer, a feature offering that is built around the Atlas APIs. So in that way, like, it kind of complements Azure Purview instead of creating a standalone product, which might require separate licensing, training, and a different integration parts. It kind of gels well from that aspect. So with that, like, I might switch on to my Azure portal to provision a Purview instance, and we'll get started. Hope you can see my screen, so let me know if you are not able to. Now, when you...
Sorry, Benny, we can see your screen, but we've lost your face, so your cam is gone off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll you provision like Azure Purview just like any other resource from the marketplace. You could do it from the portal, or you could do it from using ARM templates as well if you're using infrastructure as code, which is kind of the preferred way to do that. But for this demo, I'll be doing it through the portal. So we give it a resource group. It could be an existing one, or it could use an different name. And at the moment, like, it is available in select regions. Australia East is one of the regions that's available for Australia at the moment, but with GA, I think it'll be rolled out to most of the other regions where Azure is available. Now, as with most of the Azure services, you could also create a private endpoint to secure your outbound access, in which case it goes through the Azure backbone. So for this demo, I'll just leave it as a public access. And when I come to configuration, this is where I define the SKUs for the service. So the SKU is actually measured in terms of what we call it as capacity units. So for Azure to for Purview to scan your resources and to maintain the metadata, it requires a compute, which we call it as capacity unit. At the moment, you have the capability for 4 capacity units and 16 capacity units. One capacity unit is the ability to kind of execute 1 API per second. Okay, So when we go live, you will probably have more options around this one, and also there will be a serverless capacity that will be available. Now, the metadata is stored in a storage system, which Purview creates a managed resource group for that. And in terms of the features, like it is split up into like ability to scan and classify, which is C0, and ability to add glossary and lineage, which is C1, and ability to do some insights or reporting around it, plus all the sensitive labeling, which is D0. Now, at the time of preview, there's no pricing on these features available, so it is kind of free to try. So that's why these are all grayed out at the moment. So you could, and pretty much that's all you need to do. You can set up your tags, which is a good practice. Once you review and create, like it'll create the resource. It'll take a few minutes to create that resource. So while that's doing, I'll probably jump onto a instance that I have created previously. So once you go into the resource, it kind of looks familiar to most of the other resources. A few things to take note of here is we have added some new RBAC roles for Purview. So there are just 3 roles to be aware of. One is the Purview Data Source Administrator, which is probably the RBAC role you would give to your data steward, who will be executing the actual scanning or policies or adding new users into the Azure into the Purview ecosystem. So anyone who needs access to the data catalog needs to be given a Purview data reader permission. The data catalog can be updated like when you are updating a glossary or when you're adding a owner to a resource. So if you need to update the data catalog, you need to have a Purview data curator permission. And those are the 3 new back roles that comes with that. Now, the Purview has been created.
Sorry to interrupt you. Looks like there is some reading issues in terms of the screen and the scaling. If you don't mind to scale the font size, maybe a little bit more, so the guys can read it. In your browser, maybe go with 125. Thank you.
Is that better?
It is a bit better, but yeah, that's much better now. Thank you. Yeah, cool.
All right. So with the okay, so the Azure Purview is kind of aimed at the data governance and the data office people. So we kind of the target audience for Purview is not just your data engineers or your DevOps people. It's just like the data stewards who can go in and implement a policy, or the data analysts who can go in and have and query your data. So to kind of unify that experience of working with the platform, we come up with what we call it as a Purview Studio, which is kind of gives you a workspace experience, which is similar to what you find in, say, Synapse Analytics or the AML workspace, or even ADF, which has a similar look and feel to it. So it has this homepage which tells you, for example, how many assets, data sources you have, and how many assets you have within those data sources. And it kind of gives you a brief summary of what it is. And here you can search for all your data assets as well. But let's start with the data map. And the first step in Purview is basically creating the data map and setting up a scanning so that we got a catalog that the rest of your organization can work with. So over here, I have set up a Purview account and set up some sample data sets from my subscription. So I do have like a mix of data sources. Like I have some blobs. I have some. Sorry, I lost my mouse. I have some Cosmos DB, some SQL servers, even some Oracle databases, some Power BI instances, and stuff like that. So assuming this is your data platform, you can organize these into what we call it as collections. So the collections are like the top level items that you see. It's just like a logical container that you use to group your data sources. So you could group by, in this instance, I would just group by the type of the resources. You could go by your business units, for instance, or you could group by your resource groups or whatever you see fit. And when you create a collection, it is hierarchized as well. In this case, I've just had a one flat hierarchy, but you could have like different levels to it as well. Now, the first step when I create a data map is I will register a source. So this is all the list of data sources that you could register at the time of a preview, and you can expect this to grow over time. So as you can see, you can add some AWS S3 buckets, or you could add Azure sources. Also, you could add your on-premise databases like SQL Server, Oracle Teradata, or even SAP instances as well at the moment. And this was the Erwin and the Looker that Sam was talking about that recently came out this week. Let me go ahead and add, say, a Gen 2 data lake storage. You can give it a name. I pick a subscription. So, and so when I do this and say register, what it does is it kind of adds that it creates an entry into the data map, and it'll basically add that data source over here. So, which gives me, then I can create a new scan, which, so for all the Azure data sources, like the scanning is done by Azure Runtime, which is similar to what you find in Data Factory, the Azure Integration Runtime. It is kind of a similar engine that does the scanning, a serverless resource that does the scanning. Now, when you do your scanning, with most of the Azure resources, it uses the managed identity of the Purview, which in case will be the same name as your Purview instance. So now, before you do your scanning, you need to set up the RBAC permissions so that the Purview managed identity has all the required permissions to scan your resource. For instance, in the case of a data lake or a storage service, the Purview identity should have the blob reader permissions to scan your resources. If it's like a SQL database, or it needs to be added into the SQL DB reader role and things like that. So there are like each source has its own requirements, which is kind of documented. And these are the kind of things like when you set up your resources using infrastructure as code, you could all code that in to say, okay, so if I'm going to add my all my data lake instances into to be scanned by the Purview instance, then I will probably add the airbag roles into that as well, so that when it comes to scanning here, your permissions are ready and you're good to go. So when you set up a scan like this, the next thing is you need to, in this case, like because this is a storage container, you need to pick up all the containers. It gives you an option to choose which containers you want to include in the scanning. But if you choose the root level scanning, any folder that gets added at a later time gets picked up for scanning as well. You don't need to go back and update that one. Now, the next thing is a very important part, which is called as a scan set rule. So what it is by default, like if you look over here, so there is this, for each resource, like Purview comes up with the default classifiers that it will apply, which is called as a scan set rule. And if I have a look at it, there are like over 200 classifications that it will try to find out in your data and tag the data with. Some of these, most of these classifications are kind of derived from the GDPR PII specification. So it kind of identifies some of the information, like your driver's license, for example, your Medicare license numbers, your credit card patterns, your the BSB numbers, the ABN numbers, the HIN numbers, and even things like your GPS, the coordinates, lat long coordinates, IP addresses, and things like that. So if it's there are over 200 classifications that you get out by default. You don't need to do anything. It's available out of the box, and it can be applied to all the common data formats that are available, from Parquet to JSON or CSV or XML files. And if you need a new classification, which you will in most cases, there is a capability to add to it, which we'll see later in the demo as well. So I'll pick, for this case, I'll just pick up a default classification, and I can set like what is my scan schedule going to be like. So it could be a recurring one. So usually it's a good practice. You probably don't need to run it every day, maybe at least a week or a month, so that like it can scan your new sources or new tables or new assets that come into that data source as we go. So once you set up the scan, it'll probably take about 5 or 6 minutes to run a scan. And it'll kind of say like, so the first time it'll pick up, like say, it'll give you an idea of how many assets it discovered in that storage, and how many assets it was able to classify. And in this case, like it has said, like say it has done this. So once it does this classification, it's available for search. And this is where, like, if you're like a data analyst, or if you're even like a data engineer, if you want to look for like a particular, you can search for a particular asset, like say, I might just do just. So this will, you can say like, you can pick, for example, find out all the data sources that has a email ID on it. And then you could just, for instance, in this case, this is a SQL Server table. It kind of populates. So the graph database is now populated with a node called people. And these are the different attributes that it has. So it has different properties. For example, these are system generated properties to say when this object was created, when it was last modified, where does it sit. So that's the system properties. Then it also has other properties to say, okay, this is the schema it has identified. And for the schema, like it has kind of, if it is one of the standard classifiers that we chose for the scanning, so it has tagged to say, okay, it has found few email addresses in the login names, as well as in the email fields, some telephone numbers, some person name, and things like that. And if there's any lineage associated with it, we'll come back to that. It'll tell you where this data originated from. In this case, it doesn't seem to have picked up any lineage. One of the important things with this tool is also, like, because this is used in a data governance thing, so some of the attributes you might want to edit. For example, in this case, like if this is a people table, I want to assign like a business owner to it. So I could do that. Maybe I'll just put my colleague's name over here to say, so he's the business owner on this one. So I can save it to that. So this kind of adds another attribute to that node in the graph database. So so it kind of builds up a profile for each of your data assets as we go. So these are like on Azure data sources. What if we have something like Oracle data source? So Oracle, to scan an Oracle, which is on-prem, so you would need something called as a self-hosted integration runtime. So which is similar to, which is actually the same integration runtime that Data Factory uses to connect to on-premise data sources. So here I've got so you got to download that same, the integration runtime software. You'll get the keys there. Just link up your integration runtime and use this as your compute to scan your on-premise databases. So it will probably, you will, instead of, the only difference that you will see here is instead of the Azure integration runtime, you'll be using a self-hosted integration runtime. And because it's not an Azure resource, you will not be able to use the managed identity, in which case you'll be using here we are using the username and password. And because we are using username and password, it's usually a good idea to actually link Key Vault to your Purview. So in that way, so over here, I have linked an existing Key Vault into my Purview. So I can store my secrets in my Key Vault, and I can refer those Key Vault entries by creating a credential entry over here. So in this case, like it'll be something like this. So I have a username, but my password is coming from the Key Vault, so it's not stored. It's kind of a safe way to work with these data sources if you're not using managed identity. And that's for like scanning. And like, as you see, like you keep adding to this knowledge map. You can either do it like resource by resource, but what if you have a fleet of resources? You could either do it one by one, or if you go to the options here, so there is a feature where you see those data sources that has this word multiple as suffix. So it means like you could add a collection to that. So in this instance, like if I want, I could add my whole subscription into the scanning. So it will pick up every storage, it will pick up every database, it will pick up every ADX, it will pick up every AML workspace, it will pick up every Synapse, as long as all those, as long as the Purview account has the required RBAC permissions to scan those resources. And or I could do it like as a resource group by resource group, which I think I have set something like here. So the only difference here is there will be one scan that will go around and fix, and your scan time might be more. And yeah, so you probably need the correct RBAC permissions into those resources that you're scanning. So that is that covers scanning. Let me quickly switch back to my slides to see if I missed anything. So we talked about scanning. So scanning, like basically scanning takes control of your system generated metadata, adds the semantic metadata based on your data patterns, And we'll come back to glossaries as well. And there are some rules that you need to do. Now, when you scan, sorry, let me get out of this. There's this concept of resource sets. So when you scan like data lake, for instance, like your data lake can grow over time. So just to optimize that process, what Purview does is it takes a sample of your files in the, say, in a folder. It might take like the first few files and the recently updated files and some in the middle, and it will kind of try to see whether the schema, everything matches between the two, whether the classification matches between the two, and only if it changes, it will try to update the thing. So in this way, like it'll keep the scanning in a very optimized way. And when it does that, like, so as you know, like your storage can be, for example, partitioned by usually year, month, date, or you might have some Spark jobs running, which might create those partitions with GUIDs and stuff like that. It can identify those patterns in the file, and it will kind of tag that as well. As an example, let me show you. If I go to, maybe I'll pick this data source. So this is a resource set. So anything with that little, like a folder kind of icon in it, and it is a resource set. And then if I look into that, it tells me like this is a Spark partition, that it kind of figured that out, because like if you look at one of the files, and it gives you a sample to say, okay, this is how, like, because I might have used a data flow, or I might have used a notebook to process this file. So it might have created a Spark, a Parquet file with all these things. So it's smart enough to kind of understand, okay, I know this is a Spark partition. This is how your partitions strategy looks like for this folder. And it still gives you the schema and lineage, so it kind of optimizes the scanning process, especially for the storage objects. Now with that, like, so far we have seen like the system classification has over 200 out of the box classifications, and this will kind of increase with time as the product develops. But there will be instances where you want to define your own classifications. Things like you want to maybe tag a transaction ID to a record, or maybe identify your client ID if you have a specific way of defining your client IDs, and that's possible using custom classification. So we'll quickly have a look into that. I'm just checking for time. Yeah, good. So the way you do your custom classification is you go to your management tab over here, and you can create. So here you will see all the default classifications that are that comes out of the box. So if you want to add a new classification, so let me add a new classification. It goes by a 3-part name. Let me say this, or something like, say, so create a sales ID 1 or something like that. So I'll first create just a placeholder here. And the next step is for that classification, I'm going to create a custom rule. Now, there are two ways to create a classification rule, because this is based on the semantics of the data or the pattern that is found in the data. Either you can import a dictionary, which is just a JSON file which has a list of all possible values that you want. And that will be useful for something like a postcode or something which you could get from the Australian Post, and you could like stick it up in a JSON and you can put it there. That's the that will kind of create you that rule. Or you can create a regular expression. All right, I will do the regular expression for this. Now, remember, like this is being used by data stewards who are not expected to be data engineers, or we don't expect them to know an awful lot on the regular expressions. Yep, you are free to hand code and write your regular expressions. But if you have a sample data, like a Purview will generate the regex for you. So for example, over here, I do have some sales data from AdventureWorks. I'm going to import this file into here. And when it does that, like you can see, like it kind of scrolls through the file, and for each column it picks up, it kind of determines what regular expression should be going into that. Even to things like a GUID, it can pretty much, it has kind of found out the regex for all of the columns. So let me do the sales order ID. And I can say what's the threshold to max. So let me leave it at 60%. So the other good thing with this is also you can match the columns not just by the data pattern, but also by the column names, because so often you see like the column names are different in different systems. That means the same thing. For example, in one system you could have underscores on it, or it might be named some other way, lowercase, camel case, whatever works. You can give these two conditions to say, okay, if it satisfies either one of this condition, so it is considered a sales ID for this instance. For this case, I might just get rid of the thing. And there's a feature to test your rules here as well, which I'm not going to do that just for time. So once I create these classification rules, now I have defined my own classification rule, and I've given a regex to it. Now I need to incorporate that into the scanning. The way that I do that is by defining a new scan set rule. So over here, when I go here, I define a new scan set rule. Say scan set rules or sales. And I need to say what file type that applies to, like a thing. Did I pick up? Okay, let me say this applies to data lake storage. I can say to which file type this scan set rule applies. So if you have another file format that's not available in the standard, you can define that as well. So I might just skip that for now. And this gives you an opportunity to say, okay, so I got all these scan set rules available that I defined in the previous step. So I'm going to, when I scan next time using this scan set rule, I'm going to include my sales ID into the scanning process as well. And this gives me an opportunity to kind of filter out some of the, you may not need some of these. So if you're not a multinational company, you're just operating out of Australia, maybe some of these classifications may not apply to you. So if you take that out, it can help you save your time in scanning. So it gives you an opportunity to kind of customize this list, and you can create your own scan set rules. So, and in this way, like the next time when I scan the Gen 2 data lake, for example, I can say, yeah, So instead of the default one, I can just use the one that I just created now to scan my data resources, and that's a great way to add your custom classifiers into the scanning process. Okay. The one other thing that is Purview is tightly coupled with M365 labeling as well, sensitivity labeling. As you can see with most of the M365 products, you can see some labels that are defined by your M365 administrator. So which classifies whether a document or a presentation or a Excel file is available for a public use, or if it is just like a sample data, or if it is a very high confidential data that only a certain people should see. And this is at the like there are two ways to control this in your Office 365 apps. Like, so this is controlled by the client. So that's why you do have some training around these things to say when you classify, when you apply a certain label. But the same thing you could do at the server side by defining rules in M365 as well. And with Purview, like you can create new labels in Office in M365. You can create new rules to say. So if to say when these sensitivity labels are tagged to these data sources, and most of the times the data rules are based on your classification table, classification labels. For example, suppose if your a database column has a credit card number on it, you can say, okay, you can define a rule to say if my classification finds a credit card label in it, like tag that as a highly sensitive data asset. So you can create rules like that. At the moment, like this feature is available for all the storage services and all the SQL databases, basically. So that includes Synapse, Managed Instance, all the different flavors of Azure SQL, everything. So you, what needs to happen is this needs to be defined at your M365 tenancy, and these are called auto labeling rules. They kind of beyond the scope of this presentation, but the way they work is like your M365 admin needs to turn on a feature which says enable labeling assets, extending that extends M365 labeling to Azure Purview. Once this feature is turned on, you get like a flow diagram to kind of define your auto labeling rules based on your classification labels. So it could be based on a single classification, or if say it can be either availability of a single classification tag, or it could be you could define a rule to say if the table has either a email ID column or a date of birth. You could create rules and or any conditions defining there, and you could test those rules in M365 before that gets applied over here. So once these rules are defined over at M365, now whenever you scan, that's the one-time activity. You define the rules over here, you say what labels to apply, and whenever scanning applies, when that rule is satisfied, your assets get tagged with those sensitivity labels as well. I don't think I have any resource tagged for that. Let me have a quick look. So I don't have any sensitivity labels tagged here, but like if it is applied there, just like how you see a classifications populated, you will see the sensitivity labels flow into that as well. And that's very critical because like at this moment in preview, like all it does is doing some tagging, but like there are there are plans to use those sensitivity labels to create some workflows and processes that comes out of that in a later stage. All right, so that's with so far we have seen how to build your data map, how to scan your resources, how to classify resources, define your classification. The next important thing with data governance is also lineage. At the moment, lineage is supported on Data Share, Data Factory, and Power BI. Now, so Data Share is like a B2B data sharing service across different Azure tenancies. So suppose you have like say you're buying data from a vendor who happens to be on an Azure tenancy. So you can set up a share between your vendor's tenancy and your tenancy to say whenever he publishes a data, it kind of flows through to you, and there is a record of that data transfer at either ends, and there is some contract on how you should be using the data and how often you should be getting the data. So it's kind of eliminates the need for like using FTP services or integration services like that, especially if you're in Azure. Similarly, if you have like a downstream requirement where you're out of your data platform, you're sending data to other third parties or other applications, you could use the data share to share data between two tenancies. So in this example, like I've created a data share in my private subscription. Let me log on to that. While that's coming up, I might just show you. So what I've done is go to my data share. So what I've done is I've set up a share between my personal subscription and my internal subscription, and I'm just copying the data from the other subscription to over here, and on a delta basis, or so pretty much I've configured to say when I receive this file, it goes into a certain storage, certain folder, and that will probably kick off another pipeline, or any, if I'm linked any triggers to the event grid, it will kick off any pipelines, and that will automate that process. So like I have had like I have had one full, the first time I had a full load of the data, and then I had an incremental load of the data. And when I enable like link the lineage between data share, so I go to this management tab again, and I say like I'm going to add my data share into Purview. What it does is pretty much any time the file transfer happens, it'll the Purview will go ahead and create a lineage of that over here. So how does it look? And it's kind of automated. It does not happen at scan time. It happens when that event happens, right? So I got a data share over here. That's my share definition. And what it tells me is, okay, so I got this file from an external organization. So that's my snapshot definition, and it has gone into a Gen2 data lake, which is kind of sitting over here. So that's the view So if you're wondering like, so how did I get this file? So it kind of tells you the lineage of how this file originated. And that's a great thing. So data shares can be used at your entry points and exit points into your data flow, and the lineage is tracked about at the entry and exit points, right? Now, likewise, you could add your data factories to support lineage as well. So I do have several instances of the data factory over here, and I kind of linked all of them together. So what happens is, let me have a quick look at one of them. Maybe I'll just go over. So as with data share, so when you link your data factories to Purview, anytime the pipeline runs, the lineage is captured in Purview automatically. And that's a great thing, because like every time, and it'll have the latest lineage. So say you're deploying new pipelines, modifying it, it'll have the last lineage of that pipeline into it. So here, I think I have, okay. So here I have something like a simple pipeline that copies data from a public data set into my raw zone of the data lake. Does some transformation with the data flow. And this turns up as, if I look into my data sources, you do see the lineage of the data set, but like the key thing is when you actually look at the underlying data set, and you see like this COVID-19 data set was actually, if you can see, like it has been actually processed by 2 or 3 pipelines, because like what you see in this view is just one pipeline acting on it. But what I also have is like another data flow, data flow here, that kind of works on that same source database as well. So this kind of gives you a full a path of like what is the path that data has taken from the time it has landed in your data platform to here. And the next piece of the puzzle that kind of closes this is how does when this data gets exposed to a Power BI report, the lineage is captured there as well. So let me show how that looks like. Okay. So this is one of the scanning that I've done on a Power BI asset. So it kind of tells you, so let me have a look at this report. For example, there's a report called public holidays. So if I work backward from here, it kind of tells me, so this is how a report is generated, but in turn it has come from a Power BI, that's a Power BI data set, not any of your data source. And that data source, Power BI data source, was in turn generated by Power BI data flow, and that data flow is actually a combination of 2 other data flows, which is like a 2021 holidays and 2020 holidays. I think it's just a union. And that kind of takes the data from a SQL table. So you can see like when you put all these together, you have lineage at your entry and exit points, you have lineage at your data orchestration layer, and then when your data is kind of presented in a report, you have that lineage. So it kind of fills in the whole picture. And like when we go live, like, and a future roadmap will have a lot of these other services like Azure Machine Learning or Databricks, and the lineage for that being included by default, right? So that's covers lineage. All right. I'm just checking for time. Cool. 10 more minutes. All right. The next important piece of data governance is also the ability to define a business terminology. So far, with classification, the classification is based on the semantics of the data or the patterns in the data, right? Which is great, like which helps you to. But there are scenarios where the business users, who are the subject matter experts, need to tag some additional tags into the data, and these are called as glossaries. They are typically business terms, business terminology that are tagged to a data asset, right? The way you do that in Purview is you go to this glossary tab. You can create over here, it's called a new term. So there is a default template that you can use, or you can use your new template, or you can create your own template like how you did or custom classification. I'll just go with the default. So basically you need to give a name for the terminology that you're going to define and the definition of it. And the glossary in Purview allows hierarchy as well. So you could say like it is a parent of this. So for instance, here I built a accounts hierarchy. So as payable or receivable, and I can just fit them into the different hierarchies. And I can say if it is related to any other terminology that you've already defined, any other glossary. And one of the key things that you need to define, especially for glossary, is who owns this terminology, because you might have the same and meaning that is being used in different contexts. And that's where the hierarchies come into place. So say for example, a same terminology means something different in different contexts. You can create two different hierarchies. So you could build this glossary term by term. That's one way to do that. The other way is also Purview gives you an ability to import like in bulk. So when you so at the moment there is a CSV file with a certain template. So if you use that, so something like this. So if you use this is a template. So if you follow this to what the template prescribes. So for example, you define the top level item over here, and you define who the business owners are. And if it's a parent item, that's the top level, you don't need to give anything. And the next level is accounts payable. So see here how I've used the first level of that hierarchy followed by an underscore, the second level of the hierarchy. And here I mentioned like that is the parent of this item. And I can kind of build this in an Excel spreadsheet like this, following the same template. And when I upload that, and that's how I created this hierarchy over here, I'll get the hierarchy in I don't need to do it hand coded one by one. But like if you have if you have this existing definition from other systems that you're already using, so you could just export them and bring it over here. So all these glossaries are in draft state at the when you initially import it. So you go ahead and you got to kind of approve this or before they come into effect. And once these glossaries are placed, because this is something a business related thing, you got to add it to the assets manually. So for instance, like might look for all the tables accounts related and say pick this thing, and I could say edit And say this is part of accounts receivable, and I can update that. There's a capability to do bulk update as well, so you don't need to do one by one. So if you have, I just get everything. There's not much over there. Maybe so I could. This is just a UI feature, so I could just do a bulk edit on them and just set the same. Sorry, let's say same term as receivable, and I can apply to that, and that will kind of tag all those resources. So this is something that will be used by a business analyst predominantly, and that's the interface for that. So as you can see, the Purview Studio, like the workspace, kind of helps helps you to collaborate between different persona in the data office. So and finally is the insights module. So it's basically some kind of reporting on the, I might just close this one. So it gives you an idea of, it's kind of another view of the search. So if you're comfortable with search, that's great. But if you're comfortable with using some kind of reporting tools to kind of drill down and things like that, you can do that. For example, if I want to find all the, let's say if I want to find all the all the assets with email ID, so it says 35. So now so I can see all these 42 instances. I can play around with this. So if say if I'm a business analyst, I need to prepare a spec to say I need to redact all the data sources where I find email IDs. This is a good way to kind of quickly find out where your data assets are, and you can go about exploring. So you do have like ability to see your scans as well. So if your scans have failed, that's kind of an operation report. You got one of the key things with glossary is it tells you how many of them is missing an expert or missing a steward, which you got to fix it. So it kind of gives you on a very high level. So it kind of gives you some good insights using the audio. Now that's all the key features that are available at the moment within the preview stage of Purview. One other key thing that I wanted to touch is also the integration with Synapse. So with, as you know, like Synapse is one of the data source which we can scan. So that integration is there, but Synapse also has a two-way integration with Purview. What it means is like you can embed a Purview search into a Synapse instance. So for example, let me see if I have something. If I go to my Synapse workspace, I haven't been looking at the chat windows for any questions or anything. But if anything is there, please shout out.
Yes, Benny, once you finish, We will pop out all the questions on the screen and we can go through them
Cool.
one by one.
Sure. Thanks, Sam. Now with the Synapse workspace, you'll see like when you go to the Manage tab, you can link your Purview instance. So in this instance, like I kind of added my Purview into the Synapse workspace. And what it helps me to do is if I'm a developer, now you see the search screen at the top here. When you do the integration, when Purview is integrated, you see like you can search in your workspace as well as you can search in Purview basically. Oops. Let me refresh that. So for example, like so, what this helps you to do is if you're like a data engineer building your pipeline and if you're looking for a certain table, you don't know where that is, you're kind of leveraging the data catalog that Purview has built, and it'll help you to define your new link service from there, or you can data sets, or you can develop your new pipeline. So that kind of is the embedded integration into the Synapse that is available at the moment. So it kind of works well with your Purview sets. That's one of the nice features that is available. And I've come pretty much to the end of the presentation. There are a few things that are happening in the roadmap in terms of before we go GA and after we go GA. One of the key things is also like you will have like, obviously Purview will be available in more regions. There will be more connectors coming. There will be more connectors for Azure, more connectors for on-premise and multi-cloud. There will be more classifiers coming. Then there will be more lineage will be extended to more services and things like that. But we're also looking forward to like the master data management with Prophecy, and that's like and that kind of integration is possible now because of kind of Prophecy will be integrating with the data catalog that is produced in Azure. That's for the master data management, and something like the data quality features that you now see in Power BI, for instance, for example, like you could see like how many columns have null values, or what are the distinct values are there, or what is the distribution of the data in a certain column. Something like that is on the radar as well. But I think the most of the other features are around privacy and kicking off workflows based on policies and things like that, which is what will be coming up later. Now, as always, there are some resources out there available at the moment. Now, like as I said, like it's still in Purview. You can try out a few things. Like there's a starter kit available if you don't have enough data, or which comes pre-populated with some database, some storage objects and things like that. You can have a look at it. There's some GitHub exercises you can available if you want to learn that. And if you're a Microsoft partner, there is some training series available as well. And if you like to try out some of those features in Purview, you can sign up for that with those forms available, and you could give your feedback on the product while it's still in private preview. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take that, or I might hand it back to Sam and Arafat.
Cool. Thanks, mate. Great session. Very useful information, and the deep dive on the features and capabilities of this new data analytics services as part of the Azure platform. Pretty cool stuff. Probably I raise my question first.
Sure.
Apart from the full pack deck and slides, the last slide, which include the resources and links, is pretty much useful. If we can share it with the community, that would be great. If
Yep,
the rest
sure.
of the pack won't be available, it's still fine, but somehow that the last slide can be shared. That's fantastic.
That's fine.
So, Arafat, buddy, you want to go with the questions, or do you want me to pop them out?
Yeah, so we'll also add it to our screen so that it's easier for everybody to see that what has been asked. So I will go very quickly from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not
There is
sure if
one
it
from
will.
Ahmed, but I think Benny already answered during the presentation, which is storing the credential. Oh, yeah, good.
Yeah, so this is about, can data sources be onboarded to our data map outside the portal or via force?
Yes, definitely it can be. So whatever, like the demo that I've shown through the portal, everything can be done through the Atlas APIs at the moment. So if you want to, if you prefer to do that, like we have like some use cases for that as well, especially for glossaries. If you have like a lookup table that you can already defined it, and like you can write a API to just update your assets online instead of doing it manually. So pretty much everything that you see here can be done with the APIs.
Thanks. The other one is, how do we authenticate to third-party data sources and where are these secrets stored?
Okay, so basically with the if third-party data sources, the credentials need to be saved securely. So the recommended way is using Key Vault, and you can link your Key Vault to Purview and reference those secret entries there.
Cool.
And is there a way to disable or stop Purview on temporary basis? If not, is there any way I can stop it from getting charged?
Not at the moment, not at the not at preview, but I think there is a plan to have the serverless queues before we go GA. So you'll be charged only for that time. So for the moment, like once you're done, just tear it down.
Cool.
I think that's all the questions we had from the audience and on YouTube.
Cool.
Thanks,
Fantastic.
Arafat.
Anything else, Benny, you want to add?
No, I'm good. Like, so I encourage you to try it out on your subscriptions and see how we go. And if there's any suggestions, do let me know. Or like, I work with the engineering team. Like, I don't build the product, but I have close relationship with them. So if there's any feedback on the product, we can give it to them and see how it goes.
Cool. Yeah, I think we shared Benny's contact also, so you can find on the social media Benny. So yeah, feel free to reach out to Benny if you have any feedback during the preview session. So now we got the shortcut avenue, so we can pass through those feedbacks to the product team via Benny, which is fantastic opportunity. Thanks, Benny. Appreciate that.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you. All right, guys, thanks very much. If there is no question, then let's wrap up the evening. All right, looks like no more question for us. Okay, a special thank you to our guest speaker again, Benny, for this fantastic session. Thank you so much, everybody, to all of you for attending and for being with us. We really do appreciate everybody who comes along and supports our community and our events. It's always great to have you. And yep, we have our next meetup. So we are at the stage of organizing our next meetup. It's kind of interesting. We're going to hear from one of the startups who chose the Azure platform to build their product, and we're going to go through deep dive discussions and conversation on what a specific or particular technology or resources are chosen for different purposes. That's going to be very interesting for the next month in August, hopefully. And yeah, at the moment we are still heading towards online only, with considering the current situation in here in Sydney, New South Wales, and obviously, and we are in lockdown as such. So, however, it's too early to just to decide. Who knows? We might go back in person in August. Hopefully, finger crossed. But if you're out there, stay safe, and let's see what's gonna happen next. Thank you again. Thanks so much, everyone, for your time tonight, and hope to see you and looking forward to see everyone next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.